suffered in fire and suffering, but I certainly want to thank the very eloquent welcome from the Provost and from the Father Tom Layton, the head of the Loyola Trust. Last week in college here, life was marked by a series of commencement ceremonies, as is customary at this time of the year. And such ceremonies celebrate both the completion of a full programme of study and the commencement of the fruitful deployment of what has been learned in the phase of life opening up to the students. We could, I think, view today's launch of the Loyola Institute in a similar frame of reference. It is the completion, if you like, of a period of very careful articulation of the project which preceded this launch. And I'd like to join the Provost and Father Layton in thanking the college officials and the representatives of what has now become the Loyola Trust for their careful and painstaking work. I'd particularly like to pay my own personal tribute to the previous Provost, John Hagerty, who in many ways had the vision to create room for those negotiations and therefore for the launch today. I'm particularly appreciative of his presence with us here. This launch is also a commencement in the sense that we now embark on, I think what one could say is a very exciting academic initiative to bring Catholic theology into the university in Ireland. The hallmark of the Loyola Institute will be that it will pursue its teaching and its research with academic rigour, with breadth of subject matter, with critical methodology, and with the academic freedom that is at the very heart of the life of the university. I like to think that it's precisely those characteristics that I've named which mark the curriculum of the BA Moderatorship in Catholic Theological Studies, which was reviewed by the academic committees of the college in the course of the last academic year as preliminary to its being approved as a college degree programme. It is currently in the CAO handbook and will be offered to students in the academic year 2013 to 2014. This single honours moderatorship will offer an intellectually vigorous programme in the full stretch of Catholic theological thought. The programme includes studies in the critical hermeneutical approach to the Bible, which is so central a part of contemporary Catholic theological tradition, to the historical tradition, to contemporary ethical debates, for example, bioethics, the role of the Church in politics, and the relationships of theology and science down the ages. The programme is particularly, I think, characterised by a series of historical studies in the formation and reformation of Catholic theology, grouped in 4 periods: the modern period, the Reformation period, the medieval period, and the patristic period. Each of these historical studies is at the same time a study of theology in the making in those periods. In each case, it is the workings of theology itself, engaged with societal and cultural challenges of that period, that will be the subject of the studies. Students who undertake the programme will certainly suffer, but they will have learned to analyse key texts, including the biblical texts, of course, and those which have emerged from the subsequent theological tradition, as well as the iconographic, artistic, and literary conventions of Catholic tradition. Particularly important, I think, that we would add to, as it were, the analysis of texts, the analysis of the iconography of our tradition. Those students will have the skills to contribute to current debates about the place of the Catholic intellectual tradition in a globalized world, with particular attention to the contribution of Catholic tradition in Irish social and cultural life, to access, for example, the contribution of the Catholic ethical understanding of the human person to contemporary issues, in dialogue, in interdisciplinary dialogue with science, philosophy and law in a pluralist society. The programme includes a section on the theology of the Book of Kells, I felt that since practically every other discipline in the college has had a go at the Book of Kells, I thought that we might do so also, and particularly since it is in fact originally a work of theology. So we might get ahead of the queue there. Apart from that BA Moderatorship in Catholic Theological Studies, during the current academic year, further undergraduate course offerings, such as a 2-subject moderatorship, will be under discussion, as well as a postgraduate taught course, starting probably in 2014-15. To mark the foundation of the Institute, the Loyola Institute will be hosting an international conference on Theology in the University, International Experiences and Contemporary Issues in the autumn of 2013. It's not only in Ireland that sustained attention and new initiatives are being given to the role of theology in the contemporary university. I think it's very important to note that. This is a very significant day for university life in Ireland, but it's not just in Ireland. Right across the Western world, theology has been part of the academic life of almost every major Western university, and in very many of them there's new consideration being given to the different methodologies that are brought to bear within the study of theology today, and above all the changing nature of the Western societies and the different challenges to a theological interpretation of life that they bring. To take one example, the German Council for Science and Humanities, the Wissenschaftsrat, which has a very eminent place in advising the funding state bodies in the States about the range of sciences in the universities, it recently undertook a full review of the role of theology in its various traditions and in their historic location in state universities. And in 2010 it published a long, as you'd expect from the Germans, detailed and very interesting report with several apposite recommendations. It's hoped that at the international conference that we have in mind, one of the framers, one of those who was critical in framing that report, will be present with us. By the way, just one of its conclusions towards the end of the report says the following, and I quote the English version. It's just absolutely amazing that this, of course, is a report written in English, but the very same site in which you will find it in the internet will have its English translation as well, thus making it available in a truly international way. Well, here's a quotation, towards the end of this 156-page report. The historically grown establishment of the Christian theologies at state universities in the German-speaking area must be regarded as a success story. That's one of the conclusions. And then they offer various interesting recommendations as to how this needs to be adjusted for the contemporary, I suppose they're thinking of German society, but really Western society. The conference, the international conference which we envisage, will bring together key speakers from a range of countries to address the topic theology in the university, international experiences and contemporary issues. The Loyola Institute will now begin to build its staff gradually from this point onwards, and beginning with the Loyola Professorship in Catholic Theology that has been approved by the University Council and will shortly be advertised internationally. Father Layden has pointed out that Catholic theology is a field of study that predates the earliest universities and importantly formed part of their core curriculum as they came into being. At its best, in those universities, the early medieval universities, if you observe it closely, it always worked in an interdisciplinary fashion. One of my own specializations happens to be in the work of Thomas Aquinas, and one of the literary forms that he most favors is that which he calls the quaestio or disputatio. and you might find a good translation of those words in contemporary English if you said debate. Aquinas worked by framing debates. Aquinas made progress by framing debates. Good theology for Aquinas emerges in a well-constructed, honest debate. A series of positions or arguments or references are listed, frequently from his current philosophical debates, especially the newly discovered Aristotelian texts, but also from other texts, for instance Cicero and classical literature. Following on from that series of positions, counterpositions are set out, and the debate commences. In Aquinas, the debate is never rigged. It is a rigorous, open search for the truth. For sure, there are authorities in his work, as there is in the Catholic tradition, for notably and primarily, of course, Scripture itself, but also for Aquinas thinkers like Augustine and many others. These are indeed authorities, but yet the authoritative meaning that these authorities have is newly harvested in the interdisciplinary encounter of the debate itself. This is the kind of theological inquiry that one would wish to cultivate at the Loyola Institute here in Trinity College. Today, of course, there are many new interlocutors that have joined the debate. Contemporary theology is certainly greatly marked by its engagements with Wittgenstein and Habermas and Freud and Marx, as well perhaps at a somewhat different level with Eagleton or Derrida or Judith Butler and many others. All of these shape the kind of debate and the kind of teaching and research with which the Loyola Institute will be concerned. Father Leighton too rightly pointed out that there is a great diversity in the Catholic texts, in the classical text in the Catholic tradition, including the texts of the mystical tradition, Hildegard of Bingen, John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila. And this is one of the glories of the tradition. There is a diversity of roots to theological insight. Not one root, there's a diversity of roots to theological insight. It is hoped that this too will be reflected in the work of the Institute. But I do think it is likely that the debate format, which I mentioned there, will retain a prominent, vigorous presence in the Institute's endeavours. And finally, it's important to remember too that from an Irish perspective, this Institute and the Loyola Trust, which will support its work, carries forward questions that stem from prolonged experience of intercultural living, and indeed the interreligious dialogue that comes with prolonged experience of intercultural living. The questions that arise from that experience, they too will profoundly shape the work of the Institute in its teaching and in its research. Looking to the future, the ambition for this Institute has to be that it will grow to be an internationally recognized centre for research in some of the most pressing questions of one of the world's largest faith traditions, many of which are also among the most pressing questions for humankind as a whole. One of the functions of the university is surely to be a resource for intelligent, pluralist, healthy debate in the society in which it lives, and that is surely needed in the Ireland that is now being formed around us. Such debate, if it is to be properly pluralist and inclusive, should also benefit from the contribution of scholarly theology and theology spoken from within the resources of a tradition that have played a quite formative role in Irish culture and society. The Loyola Institute is specifically located in the Aspirin Confederal School of Religions and Theology, and I wish to say a particular word of thanks to my colleagues in the other academic units of the Confederal School, who have been so very welcoming and so very helpful to me as we began to take our initial steps. I look forward to our continued and future collaboration. I'd also like to thank the representatives of other theological centres in Ireland who are present here today. My hope is that we will find many and diverse ways to work together and together help to establish Ireland as we go forward as a particularly fine place to study theology in our time. There are very many people to thank in college, but I hope I will be forgiven if I single out just one person in the name of the many that I could. I'd like in particular to express my gratitude to the current registrar, Dr. Shane Allwright. When I came into college more than a year ago, Gulliver in his travels wasn't in it, but a kind of bewilderment quickly surrounded me. And I also thought of poor little Frodo on his travails in The Lord of the Ring. And it was frequently the registrar, Dr. Shane Allwright, who cleared pathways for me as I figured out what is a procurement code and how do you get one, and so on and so forth. There are very, very many people that I could thank here today, but in the name of all who have been of assistance to me in the college, I particularly mention you, Dr. Shane Allwright. For those who prepared the launch event here today, again there are many, but I'd like to say a particular word of thanks to the Executive Officer of the Loyola Institute, Emma Lindsay. Thank you very much.